Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Executive Committee of Arlington's 10-year action plan to end homelessness. A special thank you to all the staff who worked to make this meeting possible and fully open to the public during this time. As a reminder to all of you on the committee, our meeting is being live streamed online and on local TV stations and is also being recorded. Please be especially mindful of muting your microphones until it is your turn to speak. Feel free to communicate with our moderators via the chat function in Teams if you need assistance. You can use the chat function or hand raise feature to let us know if you have a comment. Before we start, I want to acknowledge the deep pain that so many in our country continue to feel today due to centuries of racial injustice and systemic racism. I invite all of you to join me in a moment of silence to honor the Black lives that have been taken in the recent weeks and months. We remember George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Rayshard Brooks, Rhea Milton, Dominique Fells, Robert Fuller, and so many others. Please join me for a moment of silence.
Hey there.
Hello, Pam. Thank you all for taking a moment. I also, before we start, I just want to wish everyone a happy Pride Month and to acknowledge as a COC that we're supportive of LGBTQ rights and the inclusion of all individuals in our community. As members of the COC, we know many of our clients are in shelter or in need of services due to the unjust and unequal treatment because of their orientation and identity. Pride Month serves as a reminder to all of us to uphold the values of equality, justice, love, and community. Next, we'll go into introductions. And just as a reminder to everybody to try to mute and unmute as you're talking. We'll try this a different way given our team setup, but I'll go through and call out each organization. And when your organization is called, you can share your name, your title, and your role within the COC. So I'll start. My name is Kim Painter. I'm the Chief of Staff at the Arlington Partnership for Affordable Housing, and I'm Chair of the Arlington Continuum of Care. Next, we'll go to Arlington County DHS.
I'll get us started. I'm Mary Kenyon. I am with Arlington County's Department of Human Services. I serve as the COC lead, and I am one of two moderators for our executive committee meeting today.
And I am Nicole Harmon with the Department of Human Services, Arlington County. I am the Housing Assistance Bureau Chief.
Good morning. I'm Heather Benner. I am with the Department of Human Services as well, and I'm with the Community Assistance Bureau.
Ahmad.
Good morning. Hello, my name is Ahmad Haj Ali. I'm with Arlington County, the HMIS Homeless Management Information Systems Lead.
Great. Hopefully, I think that is everyone I see. Um, so moving on to Arlington Thrive.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Andrew Schneider. I'm the Executive Director of Arlington Thrive and Chair of the Housing Subcommittee. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. ASPAN.
Good morning. This is Betsy France. I am the Interim President and CEO of ASPAN.
Thanks, Betsy.
Good morning. This is Leonard Chari. I'm the Vice President of ASPAN. I'm the co-chair of the Data and the Evaluation Subcommittee.
Wonderful. Bridges to Independence.
I don't think they've joined just yet, Kim.
Okay, thank you. Doorways for Women and Families.
Hi, this is Kathy Paul. I'm the Home Start Program Manager, and I'm the co-chair of the D&E Committee.
Hi, I'm Lindley Beckbridge. I am Doorway's Director of Communications and Outreach, and I'm co-chair of the Action Plan Outreach, Education, and Advocacy Committee. And my co-chair, Larry Padberg, is unable to join this morning, but sends his best to you all.
Great. Thanks, Emily. New Hope Housing.
Pam Michelle, Executive Director at New Hope Housing.
Thank you, Pam. Volunteers of America, Chesapeake and Carolinas.
Good morning. This is Gwen McQueenie, Vice President for Virginia Services for Volunteers of America, Chesapeake and the Carolinas. Thank you.
I'm noticing all the people I missed. So Sam from Doorways, take a moment.
No problem, Kim. Good morning, everyone. My name is Samantha Clark, and I'm the Chief Program Officer for Doorways.
Great. Any other at-large members of the COC?
Good morning. This is Melissa Bondi. I am the State and Local Policy Director for the Mid-Atlantic region of Enterprise Community Partners.
Thanks, Melissa. Now, anyone else that I may have missed or may have joined since we started? All right. So let's move into subcommittee reports. Acknowledging that committees aren't meeting right now, but it's still helpful to hear about current initiatives and next steps when meetings resume. So I will go through and I'll nominate housing to start. So Andrew and Gwen.
Hi, this is Gwen McQueenie. I'm one of the chairs of the Housing Committee, and Andrew can jump in as well. We've been really just taking a really deep dive in our racial and equity lens in regarding to our programs, so all our housing programs, both shelter operations as well as permanent supportive, and kind of looking at the different disparities among people seeking services and what barriers are people having getting to housing. Andrew, do you have anything else to add from that work?
Looks like Andrew might be disconnected. Maybe we can loop back.
Yeah, that sounds good. So let's move on. Thanks, Gwen. Let's move on to data and evaluation.
This is Kathy. We haven't met in a couple of months, so I don't unfortunately have an update to provide. Leonard, do you have anything that you'd like to share?
Not really. I think The only thing we worked on was the end of quarter reports for the third quarter. I think Ahmad is working on it, so that was submitted on time, and we still have to look at it. Hopefully, we're going to be able to meet and kind of look at it and see how the various programs are performing. So that's the last item that we looked at. That we need to look at quarter three. The last meeting we had, we talked about some validation errors that were, showing after the update from Social Solutions. We still have to look at them and see how we can be able to handle those validation errors. It's an agenda item that we still have to look at.
Thanks, Leonard and Kathy. Does anybody have any questions or anything else that they want to bring forward for just attention over the next couple months, even within our new setup? Okay, great. I'll make sure there's time at the end for kind of questions for all of these as well. Let's jump to outreach, education, and advocacy.
Hi, everyone. So we are focusing on connecting with faith leaders in our community and trying to centralize a list of some of the resources that a lot of them are offering so that it can be a little bit easier for folks to navigate in addition to the other supports that we all provide. One recent connection that we've made is with the Arlington Interfaith Network, which is spearheaded by the Arlington Church of the Brethren, Rock Spring, UCC, among others. So we are really looking forward to making a deeper connection with them and figuring out how we can work together to best serve our community.
That's great. Thanks, Lindley. Any questions, suggestions? Great. Mary, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't see Sam or Latasha yet here for integrated services.
I don't, but I know Cicely has joined from Bridges, and I'm not sure if she's got a report out on behalf of Sam.
I do not have a report out on behalf of Sam. Sam is in a training this morning, but he apologizes, but he's in a training this morning. But I do not have a report from him.
Okay. Thanks, Cicely. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
And same with youth. Just want to make sure is there anyone on the call who can provide an update on the Youth Homelessness Task Force? Okay. So Andrew is coming back. Any other before we move on? Any other comments on committee work? Questions, clarifications? Andrew, I know we lost you as we were doing housing. When do you have an update? But if you have anything else to add.
You're muted, Andrew.
All right, I'm ready for my big debut on publicly available meetings, so everybody else can feel very confident in their abilities as the general public is watching this. So I will make you all look very good. Good morning, everybody. The Housing Subcommittee, unfortunately, was not able to meet in June due to the updated policies of the county. So we've been having a lot of good dialogue virtually over email. I think we're very eager to get back together to be really talking about the things that we were talking about in the midst of coronavirus, primarily how our affordable housing providers are responding to COVID-19. A, B, taking a reinvigorated look at all of our data through a racial and demographic lens that we've done some work on already, but we wanted to recircle on that, especially across the spectrums. We were looking at some of our specialized populations like aging and then some survivor populations as well, working with Sam and Candace and others. And then thirdly, really just trying to prepare and anticipate what's going to happen with the eviction moratorium ending and how we're going to be prepared for that, and the steps that we're taking to help our providers and our residents and citizens as that moratorium comes to an end. So those are the immediate next steps for the committee, and hopefully we'll be able to meet together in the near term.
Great, thank you. Any other comments, questions before we move on?
Hey Kim, it's Ahmad with B&E. Just wanted to bring in some light. We were able to get our submission in for the point in time and the housing inventory checklist for 2020 over to HUD. We did experience a decrease in our point in time capture for January 23rd, 2020. Outstanding job from the COC on data collection on that part. Regarding our subpopulations, we did see some decreases on chronically homeless, as well as our veteran capture. They were accurate, embedded throughout all the shelter programs, along with the unsheltered captures. Also, we did get our submission for the assistance performance measure over the federal government as well. Data was in good standing, 5% error rate or less across the entire enterprise. So another kudos to the COC for their data captures and data integrity and data quality. And the last point that I wanted to make is that Social Solutions did get an opportunity to embed their APR, which is the grand report out of the HMIS, internally. We've had our small challenges with the new processes. However, using Teams and these webinars that we've gotten, we've been lucky enough to get some of these refresher trainings out to the CSC and mainly to our D&E members. So that's been an experience in itself, but also been very helpful for all of us to be like virtually trained in some shape or form. Thank you.
Thanks, Ahmad, and thanks for all your work with that data. And I know we all look forward to looking at the point-in-time count data together soon too. And we always have really rich discussions around it. So appreciate all the extra efforts that went in this year to look closely at the data and check for accuracy there. So.
Yes. Thank you, Kim.
Great. So let's move on. The next item on our agenda is racial equity. And we really just wanted to take some time, as I'm sure you have in many other meetings over the past few weeks, to not just reaffirm our commitment to racial equity, but just to have some open discussion about what you're hearing from your staff, from your colleagues, from partners, and just bring forward just ideas and conversations that you think are important to share with the group. I want to start and just share some information that all of you here know, but just by nature of our larger public audience today, just to note that in 2018, the COC acknowledged the disproportionate number of African Americans in need of homeless services in Arlington. Specifically, 65% of the persons who were provided emergency shelter in 2017 were of African American descent, even though African Americans made up at that time 8.5% of the Arlington population overall. We committed to applying a racial equity lens, to disaggregating our performance data by race and ethnicity, to seeking out best practices, as well as looking at the root cause of housing instability, vulnerability for homelessness, and barriers for persons of color. You've each been a part of this work over the past few years, and together we've started to bring forward the disparities that we have identified, and we all know that there's more work to be done. Mary, I don't know if you have anything else you want to add before we open the conversation, or anything else to share.
No, just I think you actually summarized everything quite well. We've made a lot of progress together in looking at our outcomes and disaggregating the data. While we know that our inflow is what challenges us, right? We know that our outflow looks pretty good. So although we have members of the community who are coming into our system at disproportionate numbers compared to the poverty rate or general population, they are getting access at more equitable rates on the back end to our housing interventions, which include both rapid rehousing and permanent supportive housing. So that is definitely positive. But that means we have an even bigger issue to tackle as a COC moving forward. And I think now would be a good time to pause and kind of reflect on the Thursday evening meeting that Bridges actually coordinated and convened for nonprofit partners, not just in the homeless services world, but throughout Arlington. So I'd like to hand it over to Cicely to kick us off.
I felt that coming. So on Thursday of last week, Bridges convened a good number of the nonprofit partners here in Arlington. Can everybody hear me? Okay, just making sure. We convened a good number of the nonprofit leaders and providers here in Arlington, particularly the senior leadership folks for those nonprofits, to include board members, and to just really have conversations and to really begin the conversation around the really uncomfortable conversations around race. And so I think it went very well. I think that it was just a stepping stone to where we eventually need to be in regards to seeing action from those conversations. But folks needed to be able to tell their stories and for other folks to be able to hear those stories so that we can figure out how we can best not only serve our clients, but also work and serve and help our employees. That's the best way I can put that on this morning. Anybody who was there have anything to add to that? No? Okay.
Kim, I'm no longer, and Nicole, I'm no longer on video, so this is Andrew. And I guess nobody else is raising their hand because I can't see the video. But I just wanted to say to thank you to Sam and to Cicely for organizing it and Christina Anderson for organizing it. I think that what Cicely said, that this was just a step. I think what a lot of nonprofits are struggling with is not only getting the appropriate information, but then what are the appropriate next steps. And I think that was something that kind of came out of the conversation on Thursday and hopefully will be the topic of not only that reconvening of that group, but also maybe part of this group as well. About we've all acknowledged that we need to do more, we could be doing more, but now we need to be talking about what are the concrete steps that we can be doing, both as nonprofits and as a continuum of care.
Thanks, Andrew and Cicely. Curious to hear, were there the start of concrete ideas, or it was listening, it was reflecting, it was convening?
It was really about, can you hear me? Okay. It was really about listening, reflecting, and convening. There were no start as to what racial equity really looks like for us. It was really about, we're here now and we have to have these conversations. And that was the starting point. That there was no actionable item that left out of that.
But I would add that there was a discussion about what to do next and that we should convene again and we should talk about actions.
Correct.
Yeah, so.
That is true, Pam. Thank you.
Can I ask them? Go
ahead, Pam.
Mary, it's a question for you. On your comments before about equity and the back end and whether people are moving out, whatever word you used. What do you mean by that? I mean, are people moving out at the rate they're coming in terms of racial stuff? Is that what you mean?
Yes, exactly. So the percentages are almost exactly aligned. So if we have 69% people coming into shelter who are Black, we have 69% going out into rapid rehousing or permanent supportive housing who are also Black.
I don't think that's true in Fairfax, but I need to look again. That's good. That's really exciting that we're doing something.
Yeah, because it informs where we need to focus our attention. So getting to the root cause analysis is really going to be sort of happening in the new fiscal year. We will be diving deep into the data and looking at other comparison points and really asking those questions that get to the root, much of which we know, criminal justice system, education, healthcare, all of those other systems that have disparate outcomes for minorities impact homelessness very greatly, domestic violence. So more to come on that. And I do want to take a moment just to share a note from the facilitators. They indicated that in having facilitated over 5,000 culture sessions, Thursday's session was the first time that they had not had to intervene due to interruptions, disrespect, or indifference. And they were very astounded in the best of ways. And they heard vulnerability, passion, frustration, pleas, and calls to action. So I encourage you to continue with the dialogues that you all had. And I actually excused myself from Thursday's session so that you all could dialogue without sort of, anyone from the county listening in. And I think that you guys did a phenomenal job.
For anyone who was there, or I just wonder, I think given COVID, given all the conversations that are happening in the community too, I think everyone's stretched fairly, not just stretched thin, but it's, there are different groupings of conversations which overlap. So curious if anybody has any insight in, the role this body can play or to complement, or if we're still feeling that out. But if there's any, not to jump to action too quickly, but, either action or additional listening, kind of what everyone's take is on that as we move forward along with the rest of you.
I would say, I know that there's action that needs to be done and action that needs to be pursued, but I don't at the same time want us to rush into action. There are some, there's a meme out that says, we are here, and there's all this extra work to do to get to the racial equity that we are looking at. And it's going to take a little bit more time, some more stories, some more understanding and deeper dives before we can really get to action, because people of color are exhausted. We're tired of telling these stories. But at the same time, we know that our stories have to be told so that there is some understanding. So I'm going to leave it at that.
Thank you. Nicole?
Yeah, I was just going to add in terms of action, really recognizing all the hard work that the nonprofits on this call and the Continuum Care have done over the last years to really dig into Mary's point about disaggregating performance data. I think it's incumbent on us to now elevate and share what we're seeing. We've been able to dissect sort of those outcomes by different lines of housing options, from rapid rehousing to permanent housing who we're seeing. We tackle the Arlington Landlord Partnership in terms of those that may have to go through a secondary screening to even get accepted, have their lease, their application accepted so that they can then convert into a lease. So I think adding what we've done, we added sort of the demographic characteristics to take a look at by population who are facing the barriers into housing, and learning more about, how disproportionately may affect the groups that we're trying to serve. And so I think, we've done a great job of pulling and culling that information together, highlighting it, I think is a good next step in terms of action. Is we need to talk about it. We need to share our data. We need to be vocal about what we're seeing. We need to look into the lenses of where these barriers may pose even additional challenges for the population that we serve. We know that we're dealing with populations that have, barriers and evictions and other criminal history information that may prevent them from taking the next step. But let's keep an eye on it. Let's elevate it, and let's call out what we're seeing as a continuum.
Thank you, Nicole. Other feedback, other conversations that anyone has had that you want to bring forward for the benefit of the group?
I would just add, I was speaking, New Hope Housing Board member was one of the members on the call, and she and I were talking afterwards, and she said, well, it was good, but there was really nothing new. And yes and no for me, because for me it was very different. We've all read a gazillion stories about police stopping, et cetera. It's a very different thing when you have Terrence and Sam talking about their personal experiences. It really, for me, it was just a totally different emotional reaction. And Cicely, I know you folks keep talking about your lives, but it really does help us. It used to help me. I won't speak for the world, but
I'm always happy to help. But
yeah, no, I get it. We need to act. We need to stop talking. Not stop talking. We need to add the action too. But
Cicely, and Pam and everyone, just I echo the power of story, right? And the power of listening to and staying in that place. And so as we elevate data, and I think we've for a long time been challenged with how to get more lived experience voice into our space as well. And so maybe we include that in some of these steps going forward too, and just kind of remember to push ourselves there too. I see no more hand raised. Anyone else? Well, thank you. Thank you everyone for sharing. Thank you to Bridges for leading that call. And it sounds like continuing to step up, but you have a virtual room here of support and community behind you. So. We're going to move on to talking about a HUD grant transition, kind of a bit of a 180 here, but hopefully all of you here are familiar with this upcoming change. We talked about it last month, and Gwen and Volunteers of America, Chesapeake and Carolinas expressed their desire to relinquish 2 of their HUD COC funded grants, one rapid rehousing and one PSH. And I think all of us kind of around on the call, nodded heads and kind of supported that change. And Mary reached out individually and as a group and asked for any other providers who might be interested in assuming one or both of these grants. And New Hope Housing is interested in taking both. So we want to open the floor, take some questions. Of course, Mary, if there's any kind of technicalities you want to add to the information, but then we'll need to do a formal vote to approve or disapprove the change. So we can get to the logistics of that, but I just want to open this up for discussion, for questions. Pam, I don't know if you have additional comments, and then if someone feels ready to motion to move the amendment forward.
I would just add, Kim, that although a formal vote is not required, we felt that it would be most appropriate to get the endorsement from the executive committee. There have not been any other providers outside of New Hope that have expressed interest since we first discussed this in the May executive committee meeting. And this would actually require a grant agreement amendment change. It would be a recipient change. So nothing related to the grant in terms of number of people served, budget line items, none of that will be impacted. And I think New Hope is seeking the endorsement. VOA has been a great partner for many, many years, and they've been doing some realignment internally as an organization. And they also highlighted how challenging it can be to be a shelter operator and not have direct access to some of the financial resources like rapid rehousing or permanent supportive housing. So as COC lead, I do endorse the change and support it.
Great. And this is Melissa. And following the chair's lead, I would move for the XCOM to endorse this transition, this transfer of the contract.
Thanks, Melissa. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thanks, Cicely. Questions, concerns? All right. Hearing no further questions or discussion, I want to move forward with the vote. For the sake of clarity, since we're not all in one room, I'm also similar to introductions, just going to go organization by organization. As a reminder, each organization has one vote, and then any kind of at-large or public interest members also have an individual vote as well. So please say aye to approve, nay to oppose, or you may choose to abstain. I don't know if this is exactly, I should start, and I'll call myself as the chair, and I vote aye. Next for Arlington DHS.
Aye.
Thank you. Arlington Thrive.
Aye.
Thanks, Andrew. ACE Band.
Aye.
Bridges to Independence.
Aye.
Doorways for Women and Families.
Aye.
Thanks, Kathy. New Hope Housing.
I think we abstain because we're conflicted.
Thank you. Volunteers of America, Chesapeake and Carolina.
An aye, but I don't know if I have to abstain either.
Yeah. Mary can figure out how to count that one. So. And then Melissa is here as an at-large member.
Melissa votes aye.
Thank you. And anyone I forgot, I'm looking at Mary. I'm sure we captured the group. Great. Thank you all for your endorsement. I know we roll with a lot of changes. Gwen, to you and all of your colleagues, I just echo Mary's sentiments. A really great thank you for all of your work over the past several years supporting the homeless population in Arlington. Let's move on to COVID response. We really thought it was important to make sure everybody's up to date on current happenings, some upcoming changes, and then we also have some recommendations from our consultant Housing Innovations for how to administer rapid rehousing specifically during this time to make sure that we are rehousing the most vulnerable populations as swiftly as we can. So I will turn this over to Mary. Do I hold this still with us, thank you.
Yes, I'm actually going to pull up the recommendations. Everyone has had this document for a while now, so we can re-review it and also field any questions that folks may have or concerns around any of the recommendations. It is about 12 total recommendations, some of which we already adhere to as a continuum. All right, and I'm going to share this. All right, can everyone see?
Yeah, you might just want to scroll all the way to the top just for. Good.
Now I can blow this up a little bit.
That's good.
Perfect. All right. So just to briefly summarize these recommendations that Housing Innovations pulled together for us, they're pretty much aligned with the National Alliance to End Homelessness Framework for a COVID-19 crisis response and a continuum of care. Essentially, we had already identified people with known COVID-19 risk factors who were currently experiencing homelessness. And we worked with all of you as partners to sort of thin the census, specifically around our congregate shelter settings, and also at the DV Safe House and family home. So these recommendations are really aligned with enhancing our existing prioritization process, specifically for rapid rehousing. So we know that while we have a prioritization process in our centralized access system policy and procedure manual, we've been a little bit slower to operationalize that. And what modifying the prioritization process will do, it'll just expand who we can prioritize rapid rehousing funding for. And we know also that we're getting ready to have some pretty large infusions of funding for various expenses related to not just emergency shelter operations, but also targeted prevention and rapid rehousing through the CARES Act funding that is still forthcoming. So essentially, to go back through the requirements, we would first implement a requirement for all rapid rehousing providers to report availability of rapid rehousing projects to serve any additional households within 24 hours of such availability. The great news on that recommendation there is that for the most part, providers are keeping in close communication with DHS on that. The second would be, and feel free to raise your hand. I'm kind of reading as I go along. So my co-moderator, Nicole, and our chair, Kim, please stop me if someone has a question about any of these recommendations. Like number one, the second recommendation is something that we already do, which is to implement a requirement for rapid rehousing providers to only admit new clients that are referred through and approved by our CAS team. We've not had any issues with that, so I don't think this will be anything controversial. Number three, continue to identify new people with known COVID-19 risk factors currently experiencing sheltered and unsheltered homelessness using HMIS data. Another great news bulletin here, we have been using HMIS data across our 4 shelters. The exception, of course, is our DV shelter because their data is not housed in the homeless management information system. So we would continue to have Ahmad support us in running the reports that speak to any individuals, whether that be a young person or an older person that is at risk to COVID complications because of a pre-existing medical condition. From there, we would also seek to implement a requirement for shelter and outreach providers to identify and report to DHS any people who have known COVID-19 risk factors that might have been missed on HMIS reports. So of course, we pride ourselves in having high quality data in HMIS, but it's also we rely on our consumers to provide us the information and that we input those personal health conditions. So we just want to make sure that we're not solely relying on HMIS data so that we can be fully inclusive of folks who may have COVID-19 risk factors. All right. Next up is to maintain a current list of all clients with known risk factors for COVID-19 complications that are living in unsheltered locations, in our congregate shelters and overflow hotels, and regularly share that list with shelter and outreach providers. And again, we have several by name lists already happening and already being shared. And I think Friday was our first convening to really discuss permanent housing solutions for our folks that were placed into hotel. So this is a great start for us. Next up would be implementing a requirement for shelter and outreach providers to submit a referral to CAS for people on the COVID-19 vulnerable clients list within 2 business days of being added to the list. That one's pretty self-explanatory. We know that we've had a lot of slow movement in terms of inflow into our shelter system during COVID, but we do have the eviction moratorium that will be over towards the end of this month. And while we're hopeful that our prevention efforts have served its purpose in preventing homelessness, we still will know more about whether or not we have folks coming into shelter as a result of eviction for non-payment of rent. So recommendation 7 ties into recommendation 6, which is to the extent that referrals for all people on the COVID-19 vulnerable clients list are not submitted to CAS within 2 business days, redeploying county or private nonprofit case management resources as needed to achieve prompt referrals. And, one of the dialogues we've been having with our COVID-19 response planning and messaging that we've gotten from the state is that we need to be prepared to staff up with some of the ESG CARES Act funding that will be coming through our pipeline. So this kind of supports that messaging that we're getting around increasing staffing. Recommendation number 8 is to prioritize clients not matched to an immediately available PSH unit or other immediately available exit option for rapid rehousing placement as follows. So people with known risk factors for COVID-19 complications that are living unsheltered or in a congregate shelter location. And then the second prioritization factor would be people with known risk factors for COVID-19 complications that are currently living in a hotel. And just to speak on this a little bit, if we know that someone is most appropriate for permanent supportive housing, but we don't have any movement, we can always use rapid rehousing as a bridge to permanent supportive housing. That is an option that's listed on our rapid rehousing referrals, and I am starting to see more requests for a bridge to permanent supportive housing come in to the department, which is a great sign because we can use rapid rehousing to end someone's homelessness and still get them connected with the right level of care, even if it's not immediately available. The next recommendation is to expedite placements, temporarily eliminate the requirement of referring providers to consult by phone with the CAS staff for all rapid rehousing referrals. Recommendation number 10 is to increase rapid rehousing caseloads as necessary to enable full expenditure of rental assistance funds. Though larger caseloads may be suboptimal in light of the crisis, promptly housing as many vulnerable households as possible is essential. And continuing with the use of remote case management options is also likely to help manage higher caseloads. Last but not least, exploring creative ways to fully and promptly use all available rental assistance resources, enable assertive rapid rehousing case management is the last and final recommendation. And I know Nicole just messaged folks. If there are any questions, feel free to let her know in the chat box, so we can have a great dialogue about these recommendations that we're revisiting.
Mary, this is Kathy Paul. I'm sorry, my internet is down, so I am just joining through my phone. I did have a question about enrolling people in rapid rehousing who are candidates for permanent supportive housing. In the past, we've had difficulty getting people into a unit before the client sort of times out of rapid rehousing. And I'm wondering, are there any thoughts about like increasing permanent supportive housing slots as well, or increasing units so that those individuals who are referred to rapid rehousing with the goal of then moving to permanent supportive housing will be able to transition within the time frame of rapid rehousing?
That's an excellent question. And I think historically we've tried to not only increase the number of permanent supportive housing units that we have on the federal, state, and local side, but we've also tried to move people on that have, no longer need the supportive services, although those are fewer and far between, but we do try to do that as a system. Also, Kathy, I think that this will take a deeper level of coordination among providers on the front end. And what I mean by that is if we know someone should go through permanent supportive housing, really making sure that we're connecting around what the length of rapid rehousing assistance will be, ensuring that those folks will still be prioritized for permanent supportive housing, and then making sure that there's constant communication while they're in rapid rehousing, particularly with local and state, because the county administers those programs. We have units that there are a designated number of units at specific sites. So it's not like they can just transition in place from rapid to permanent supportive housing. So it would be a little bit easier if we are coordinating the rapid to permanent supportive housing transition through the CAS or federal funded permanent supportive housing, because those folks would have an opportunity, as long as the units, meet HQS, are under FMR, fair market rent, to transition in place. So ideally, that's what we will be going for. And I think that we have an expectation, at least I would have an expectation, that it could take up to a year for the transition to happen, just because the need is that great right now, right? I don't know if any of our PSH providers want to weigh in, namely you, Pam, or folks from ACE-BAN on the federal side.
So I will chime in. It's possible, but I think what we have to realize is going into July 1, the excess funding that we had for PSH, FMR came down. So I believe now it's 1454 from 15 somebody. So that's going to be a challenge because we have overlisted anyway. So we just have to review the budget and see whether we can be able to take additional people, vis-a-vis taking into account that our community, the rents are a little bit higher than anywhere else. So we have to factor in all the variables, which is the escalation in rents, the annual increases in rents or whatever. Mm-hmm. And also, we have a number of folks that are into PSH who do not have an income. So we have to review it. I think what we can do is July, when we start July, we're going to look at how can we project and see if we can be able to take additional participants. For those not in the know, we already have a partnership with Doorways, and Bridges is also included. to take families into PSH. Now, we can continue to expand it, but we need to realize that if you're bringing in a family, you normally want to get a 2-bedroom apartment or 3-bedroom apartment. The rentals go up, so you don't want to overextend yourself, and then you end up with not enough money to pay for the rent. We are very much open to really looking at the budget come July and see what are the innovative ways we can deploy to increase the number of families into those projects.
Thank you, Leonard. Great points there.
Thank you, Mary and Leonard.
And also, just to add one other piece, and we've been having dialogue and conversation around this, folks, now is the time for us to get even more creative with our housing solutions. And that does include shared housing, right? Rapid rehousing was not designed as a housing first model around really high cost housing markets. That's something that we already know. And we do, I don't want to steal the thunder of one of our upcoming agenda items, but we are slowly going to start to introduce the best practices and using rapid rehousing with the shared housing model, not just to you guys as leaders, but also to line staff so that they can start to conceptualize how to do this and how we can fold it into our system. We want to, rapid rehousing is designed, of course, to end homelessness and not necessarily poverty, although we know that's one of our aspirational goals as a continuum. And we need to make the resources stretch. Particularly as a community like ours that is resource rich when it comes to rapid rehousing funding that we receive at the federal and state levels and local level as well. And I would just say that keep that in the back of your mind, shared housing and formalizing our move on strategies for permanent supportive housing. So folks that no longer need that level of intensive supportive services that might be able to transition to a housing grant. And that means that we have to start the conversation before they even ever step foot or are referred to the program so that it's not catching them off guard. And they know to anticipate the conversation when they're ready and when it's appropriate. We've just got to change some of the things that we've been doing because, we don't know how long these resources will last, right?
Mary, I have a question. And it could be my ignorance. I'm hoping you can clarify. So with these rapid rehousing recommendations from Housing Innovation, if utilizing those funds and prioritizing rapid rehousing for those to enter permanent supportive housing, where permanent supportive housing has their own prioritization sort of levels, namely homeless, right? Chronically homeless. How did the two reconcile? So if someone is rapidly rehoused, does that not sort of restart the clock for homelessness or chronically homelessness, which therefore would affect their prioritization to permanent supportive housing?
That's a great question, Nicole, and I'm glad that you asked it. The way that our policies and procedures for CAS are set up, it's done in a way where we are able to do concurrent referrals, right? So at the same time that you want to bridge someone from rapid rehousing to permanent supportive housing, they're going through that permanent supportive housing referral and prioritization process. So we're still targeting the most vulnerable. We're still prioritizing chronically homeless or even veterans who are not VASH eligible or SSVF eligible for that service. And it's really based on what their SPDAT score is, right? So for the service prioritization decision assistance tool that we use uniformly across the system, if someone is designated for rapid rehab or for permanent supportive housing, that's what we're going to. We're just using the rapid rehousing subsidy just to supplement it so that they can end their homelessness, and then just really have that bridge over to permanent supportive housing. So they do not lose their prioritization. And that is exactly why there has to be very close and careful coordination. We can't just put someone in rapid rehousing and then decide later on, oh, this really isn't a good fit for them, in most cases. The other piece, Nicole, is one of the decisions we made as a continuum last year in May was to convert roughly 50% of our stock that has historically been dedicated to chronically homeless to a dedicated plus model, which opens us up to prioritizing folks who are vulnerable and more likely to become chronically homeless if we don't get them into housing quickly with the appropriate supportive services. So all in all, they will not lose their prioritization. We just have to be really tight on the front end about what we're communicating and how we partner. So at the PSH admissions committee level and also at the rapid rehousing referral process, which I think we're pretty solid so far. So it can be done. It's just another small layer.
Mary, my concern, I don't know if that's the right word, is that if somebody needs PSH, they need a lot more supportive intensive services than rapid naturally offers. It goes back to the thing about case management supports and needing more, because otherwise we'll set people up for failure. Not necessarily everybody, but I just that worries me a lot.
So having the supportive services in rapid rehousing, right? So the way I think that's a great point, Pam, and the way that I look at it is rapid rehousing is designed with that in mind. Folks that don't need intensive rapid rehousing case management shouldn't get it and don't need it, and they're able to exit out of rapid rehousing much more quickly than someone who needs a higher level of assistance. I think we are. We're doing a balancing. Do we make someone sit in shelter and get, shelter case management that's not necessarily as intensive as it would be in permanent supportive housing, or do we get them into housing? Particularly with the congregate shelter settings, as we know from our cluster of cases at the one facility in our system, people who are at risk for complications, the safest place for folks not to get COVID is in their own homes. So that's really the driving force behind this. Of course, we want to prevent and end homelessness for everyone, but in the middle of a pandemic right now that we don't know, are we out of our first wave? Are we headed into a second wave? The numbers are still rising. This gives us an opportunity to put people in housing and really try and wrap around whatever is available in the community. And there's a lot available right now, specifically as a result of COVID. And as we staff up, right, we're starting to see some of the inflow between not just the CARES Act funding, but also the private funding that we were able to secure from Kaiser. We should be able to take care of the limited number of people that may need the bridge from rapid to permanent supportive housing.
We just need to be aware of it.
Absolutely.
As we pick out who's going to rapid as a bridge to PSH, what kind of services they'll need in that period of time that they're waiting for PSH.
Absolutely. And that is exactly why I am in support of the close coordination on the front end if you all decide to adopt these recommendations. Although reading through them back in, when we looked at it in May and here we are in June, you guys, we've already started operationalizing a lot of these things just because it was necessary. Like it was necessary for us to come up with a by name list of people who are in hotel to ensure that we were still focusing on housing. So some of this is just a formality. And then, some of it does require these conversations about ensuring that we don't take away someone's supportive services level. in absence of having permanent supportive housing. Like, we have to have that end in mind, that we are going to transition them from rapid to permanent supportive housing, because that is the best housing intervention for them.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other questions? I don't see any in the box, but we do want to leave it open for folks that might have more questions. Well, I guess my next question would be, having had the opportunity to digest the document and understanding that there will be additional coordination required if we do make a decision to either adopt all or some of the recommendations from our consultants at Housing Innovations. Does anyone feel comfortable moving forward with formally adopting this COVID-19 prioritization change, or enhancement, should I say?
Our providers are okay. I'm okay. Easy for me to be okay.
Same here.
I mean,
Kim, you want to follow the same?
No, we're fine.
Yeah.
From Eastern, we're okay with it.
Yeah.
Right.
We'll figure out how to make it work.
I hear a yes from ASPAN, from New Hope, Doorways.
Sorry, yes.
No worries. Bridges.
We're good.
Okay, thanks. Arlington Thrive.
Yes, thank you.
Volunteers of America.
Yes, we agree.
Okay, and we got our public interest. Arlington County. I presume a head nod or a yes.
Yeah.
From...
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you all. Thank you for all the additional steps that you're taking during this time, and effort and coordination, and of all your teams as well. Mary, did you want to cover any additional COVID updates?
I think it is absolutely worth acknowledging all of the hard work behind the scenes from all of you all. We've been having, 3 months now worth of twice weekly meetings as a leadership team. And, we've not had any of our folks have any major complications as a result of COVID. We survived our first outbreak in our congregate shelter facility. Everyone there is now COVID-19 free. So kudos to the team at ASPAN for bobbing and weaving and moving and pivoting, and, all of you all enduring multiple iterations of a standard operating procedure, and closing day programs temporarily and opening new day programs, and just to make sure that we're meeting the needs of our most vulnerable community members, and making sure that as the entire state was under a stay-at-home order, folks still had access to a shower and to a meal and to a face and to education about COVID and to a mask and to hand sanitizer, which was initially incredibly hard to find. I think that's a testament to the commitment of everyone here on the call, your teams, your staff, your overnight staff, your case managers, your janitors who had to step up their cleaning protocols. But that's just a reminder of what great work we do and how collaborative we are. But also, it's not over. We don't know what's to come. There is no vaccine or cure yet. So we have to continue to be as prepared as we can to keep our folks safe. and not have any loss of life while this pandemic continues. There are other systems out there who have not been as fortunate as we are. So I'm really, really proud of the work. And that's the good news. Now to move on to the I won't say it's bad news, but you all are already aware that the days in will be phased out at the end of this month, which will still leave us with a full 44-room Highlander Motel as our facility for folks who are COVID positive or presumptive positive. Just wanted to take a brief moment if there were any questions or concerns about what the phase out plan looks like. And I'll also hand it off to Nicole if you wanted to add anything about the transition process.
Just briefly, as we transitioned guests from the days in over to the Highlander, we have sort of a by names list of individuals. We've done, as Mary highlighted, there's been a lot of work since COVID began roughly 13 weeks ago, particularly with our street outreach and making referrals for individuals that are high risk but street homeless, and making those referrals to the hotel. So we have an opportunity here. I'm not exactly clear when our FEMA contract with the Highlander will end, but there's an opportunity here for those that we've engaged and have built a rapport with for these referrals to get them safely in rooms for isolation, to open them up to services so that connections can be made either to shelter and or while they're there, can we get them connected to housing opportunities? So we've set up sort of bi-weekly calls, that's what bi-weekly calls, so that we can really, again, by names list, look at who's connected to who may not be connected, and what the appropriate intervention would be.
Thank you. Heather?
Thank you both. Mary, you were going to update on some training that I think you referenced earlier for everybody.
Yes. So in trying to prepare for all of the funding that we have that will be coming in the near future, we've asked for the support of our consultant at Housing Innovation to really bring some trainings forward to really line staff and case management. How we devised these next 3 trainings that I'm going to share with you was birthed out of the weekly call that we have together. So I usually meet once a week on Wednesdays with case managers, overnight staff, some of our DHS staff from the Treatment on Wheels team and Aging and Disability, and we really talk about client-centered issues. So out of some of their feedback and requests, I partnered with Lauren Peretti, and we have 3 trainings coming up. There will be 3. Let's see, the first training will actually be on June the 29th, and this will focus specifically on housing first and rapid rehousing. Great point about this is, you know, DHCD, the Department of Housing and Community Development, which is one of our funders, has shared with us that they would like to see us strengthen some of our housing first practices in Arlington. So this is a great starting point because we know that there's likely for us to receive the bulk of our CARES Act funding in rapid rehousing as an intervention. So folks were pretty excited, and we have a pretty large pool of attendees so far. So I will be able to report out how that goes. Then next for our training series, another recommendation from your teams directly, helping clients adhere to COVID-19 transmission prevention protocol, right? So some of the feedback that we've been getting was around folks, you know, being very mobile and very transient. So this will be a person-centered training that will give your staff an opportunity to help clients adhere to COVID-19 transmission prevention protocols that we've established. And last but certainly not least, on July 22nd, we will be having Andrea White from Housing Innovations is actually going to coordinate this one. And it's going to be using shared housing and rapid rehousing. So that shared housing model, the staff there will have opportunities to ask questions about how and why and all of the mechanics behind using shared housing. And it is my goal to continue with these virtual trainings throughout the end of the year. We know that we can't meet face-to-face right now, but we do want to make sure that we've got some continuous training happening, not just for us as leadership, but for our folks that are on the ground and have the day-to-day interactions with clients. And if anyone on this call wants to go, just let me know and I can get you added to that training. They're each about an hour to an hour and a half each.
Thanks, Mary. So just rounding out to the end here, a few announcements. If you have an announcement for the group, can you place it in the comments so we can catch you at the very end or raise your hand? Mary, maybe I'll start and go a little out of order and then let you weigh in. So I know we're a little bit of a broken record here on the chair and co-chair vacancies, but just as a reminder to everyone, what we have vacant is our co-chair position, an upcoming housing chair position to fill Gwen's shoes, and then the Youth Homeless Task Force co-chair position. We talked and welcome your feedback on this, but given all that's going on, I think maybe we push to really target September to fill these slots, to use some time during the summer, and also to provide some space for folks who might want to step up but just can't step up right now. I think we all know what kind of extraordinary pressure and time you all are putting in. So that's what I propose in terms of our focus. Thank you, Mary, for making us all smile. So I think really look to September for especially the co-chair and the others too, or the vice chair and the others. Mary, do you want to cover DHCD and if there's anything related to the HUD program competition?
Yes, absolutely. So all I can tell you is buckle your seatbelts, folks, because you're going to get a lot of quick requests and fulfillments and grant agreements from DHCD. We have one small portion of our CARES Act funding that you guys should have grant agreements very shortly. This is specific to emergency shelter operations. So we're getting about a little over $210,000. We covered the details in our, regular COVID-19 call. But, we knew going in when the state asked us, how much it would take for us to end homelessness by 2022, that we would be putting in a big ask that would be resized. So please bear with me as we are trying to process all of the DHCD last minute requests that will come in that require quick turnaround times. I thank you all as well as your administrators. Moving on to the HUD COC program competition, I don't actually have any updates for you all other than no news is good news, and we are proceeding as if we're going to have a regular competition this year. I've not gotten any indication that we are not going to have a competition. Thankfully, we are a COC that does a year-round competition model, so many of the steps that we would normally have to take have already been fulfilled. So please be on standby. As soon as the NOFAs release, we'll be ready to rock and roll. I can tell you that there was a valiant attempt in the House bill for the 4th or 5th CARES Act funding that gave a directive to HUD and made the recommendation to suspend the HUD COC program competition. The Senate, and Melissa, feel free to chime in if I miss anything, was very adamant that they would not be approving the bill that the House passed, and that they would rewrite their own. Whether or not that language to suspend the HUD COC program competition and just, submit forth the allocations given to communities from last year, will make it into whatever happy medium our, elected officials agree to, we don't know. Melissa, you have any updates?
That was perfect. The only thing I'll share is we do hope to see an outline on the Senate's own version of a bill this week. And so that will help us get a sense on all the housing vulnerable communities kind of priorities, where they are, which will help us understand what needs to be reconciled with the HEROES Act on the House side. So,
thank you, Melissa. And just for the benefit of the audience, the time frame that we typically have to submit. So last year there were some delays. I think the NOFA was released the beginning of the second week of July. From that point in time, we had until mid-September to do everything that we needed to do, which includes convening a priorities committee, a total of 10 individual grant applications, plus our consolidated application, plus ranking, plus prioritization. So a lot of work ahead of us that probably would not begin until July. We will also have to come to terms with our funding priorities, which have not changed a whole lot over the last couple of years. It's usually been rapid rehousing and permanent supportive housing. I don't think that will change much, especially in light of the pandemic. And yes, so again, buckle your seatbelts, folks.
Great. Thanks, Mary. I'm not seeing any other requests for announcements. So I think we are ready to end our meeting. Just really thanks again to everyone for your comments, for your input, for your time. So have a great week, everyone, and take care.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Have a good day today.
Bye. Thanks, Kim. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.